All right. So tonight we are going to discuss phase 3 and phase 4. And we will go over quite a few things. Certainly, you may have more questions, so I welcome you to either interject as we're going along, or you can ask those questions at the end as well. We'll have an open forum, or if you have other questions or other things you'd like to share at the end, I really welcome that because we all learn from one another. I always learn from you guys, and I really feel that, because you guys are the ones who are following the program currently, that you'll also be able to share some of your own personal experiences with others that could certainly guide them in a good direction as well. So phase 3 and phase 4, what we're going to discuss today is what maintenance looks like, how to maintain your metabolic balance lifestyle for long-term success while still enjoying life. Very important there. When should you do a reset? How to add in new foods that aren't on your meal plan. And we'll talk a little bit about portion sizes for new foods, but I actually realized after I'll likely just send this as a handout for you. And we'll calculate your alarm weight. So this is something, if you haven't heard me speak of it, the alarm weight is very, very important when you're in phase 3 and phase 4. So the number one thing is, shed that fear. When it is your time to move into phase 3, it's often filled with uncertainty and fear of new foods. I hear this from clients a lot, where they feel so good. Perhaps they've lost the weight. That may have been one of their goals. Or perhaps they've just come to metabolic balance because they have a lot of digestive issues, food intolerances, pain, fatigue. So often what I hear from clients is when it's time to move into phase 3, they are afraid. They're actually afraid because they feel so good. So I want to help guide you so that you're not going to be fearful when the time comes about that you move into this phase 3 and phase 4. Also, you'll want to remember that metabolic balance was designed for you to get you balanced, okay? So those initial foods that were prescribed are very specifically laid out for you with the nutrients that your body needs to balance your hormones, your enzymes, your metabolism. So what we don't want is to stick to those foods and those foods only for the rest of your life, because you will become imbalanced in an opposite way, and we don't want that either. So, the old saying, moderation is key, variety is key. Those are 100% true. We want you to keep that variety, and we want you to make sure, you have it in moderation. It's also vital that you add in these variety of foods, as I mentioned, that were not on your meal plan, and that's going to keep you balanced, but it's also going to keep you motivated, right? Because let's face it, nobody really enjoys eating the same foods over and over again. So this is exactly the reasons why there are 4 phases to the program. So please, when it is your time, don't fear shifting into phase 3 and phase 4. And I'm going to give you the steps tonight to help you move into phase 3 and phase 4 very consciously and with confidence that you're going to be okay. The other thing I'll just mention is I did have a couple of clients in the years that I've been using Metabolic Balance where they did fantastic. They met their weight goals. They felt fantastic. And then I didn't see them for a couple of years. And they came back to me because what was happening was they started developing food intolerances. And I truly believe it was because they were eating the same foods too frequently for too long. So that is another thing that we want to avoid, and another really good reason to make sure we add in those other variety of foods that weren't prescribed initially. All right, so the objective. The objective with Metabolic Balance is not to diet, okay? Dieting never works. I always say when you diet, you're guaranteed to die because it's awful, right? Dieting it's being perfect. It's not being realistic. It's not allowing yourself to be human, right? So our objective is to make MB a way of life, to maintain your goals, but not to have that diet mentality. And the success rate with metabolic balance is really good. One of the key things with measuring success rates when it comes to weight loss programs is not to see how much people lose initially. It's actually to see how much they maintain, down the road. So there have been studies where they've shown that after 2 years, 60 to 80% of clients reported that they continued to maintain their normalized weight and blood lab values with metabolic balance. That's a huge success rate. So just know that you have a very successful program that you are using, and it really can go far to help keep you healthy for a long time. So reminder, know before you start metabolic balance, if your old eating patterns didn't get you to your goals before, they won't work now either, right? And that's a hard thing to shake, okay? And this is where a lot of programs really drop the ball. You'll be told what to eat for X amount of time until you get to your weight goal or until you feel better. But then they don't help you move away from that into more variety of foods. So the key with metabolic balance is we don't want you to go right back to your exact old eating habits, but we don't want you to only stay with metabolic balance either. So we want you to have a blend of the two. And that's what we're going to talk about. So what makes metabolic balance successful? Well, you guys have a proven system. This system that you've been using is proven time and time and time again. I believe there's over 1 million, I think we're up to almost 2 million satisfied clients worldwide. It was designed by your blood values, another reason why it's so successful. And of course, the support and guidance that you get with the program between the coaching, the specific information in your guide, those are all vital parts to why this program is so successful. But what makes it even more successful is the ability to rinse and repeat. Okay, so this is where those 4 phases are really, really helpful, because you're just going to rinse and repeat what has been working for you, but tweaking it to make it more lifelong doable. All right, so just a refresher, you guys have probably seen this a couple of times by now, but let's go through the 4 phases really quickly. So phase 1, if you're watching this, you've probably already completed that phase 1. That is the 2-day cleanse, okay? It's designed to help get rid of cravings and obviously to cleanse out the colon. Phase 2, this for the first 2 weeks is a diet period for 14 days, no treat meals, very, very strict. You're aiming for perfection. Phase 3 is your relaxed dietary phase, and this can be weeks up to months. Now, one thing that I feel they're missing in these 4 phases is that there's kind of a phase 2B, which is more of a phase 2 relaxed. And so this is past those 14 days, because no matter what your goals are with metabolic balance, I can guarantee you that 14 days is not enough time to reach your goals fully. Even if you only wanted to lose, 10 pounds of weight and you lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks, I still recommend my clients to continue on phase 2 relaxed after those 2 weeks, because that is going to help restore your metabolism, restore your insulin. And then of course, if you have other concerns, maybe weight loss wasn't a goal, maybe you have inflammation, maybe you have digestive issues. Honestly, 2 weeks is not enough time to fix anything, really. You may feel amazing, but my recommendations is always that no matter who you are and what your goal is for metabolic balance, my recommendation is that you follow the phase 2 and then move into phase 2 relaxed for at least 4 to 6 weeks minimum. And then we move into phase 3, okay? So back up a little bit, that phase 2 relaxed, that's when you're following the meal plan and you're having a treat meal once a week. And perhaps you might be eating out, but you're basically following the meal plan, except for when you're having a treat meal. Now, phase 3. Phase 3 is when we really start to relax. And this is going to be very different for each person. It's going to depend on what your concerns are, what your digestive health is like, and what your overall health is like. And so it really can take weeks up to months to complete this. But what happens is once you're done, then you're done. You're in phase 4, you're in maintenance. And this is the part where you make the program work for lifelong. It's an unlimited duration. Okay. And I can tell you that it is really easy to do. I've been following Metabolic Balance now for 7 years. And so I'm in that phase 4, but I do go back and repeat once or twice a year. I'll go back and I'll repeat that phase 1. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Or if I just start to notice a few things, like perhaps my pants are getting a little snug, maybe I ate a little too much for a couple of weeks and I'm starting to feel a little bit puffy, sometimes I'll just go back to phase 2 and I'll just start weighing all my foods again. I'll, just get really strict again, just to get, feeling a little more comfortable. So that is the idea behind those four phases. So when do you move into phase 3? There's 2 times that you would move into phase 3. The first time is when you've reached your goals. So this would be your weight goal, your health goals, if you're trying to reduce medications, if you're trying to normalize blood labs, those are all goals. And so when you've met those goals, you're going to move into phase 3. Now, the second time that you may move into phase 3 is if you have lost 44 pounds and you still need to lose more. So for those who have 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 pounds to lose, you may go into phase 3 even though you're not at your goals. Okay, so this is what we call a bit of a pause. And there's some different reasons for going into the pause. The number one reason is to give a little bit of a shock to your system so that you don't plateau. So phase 3 will just help to add in some new foods, shake up that metabolism, and then we go back into phase 2 relax. So phase 3 will kind of give that pause. The other reason though as well is because we want your skin to catch up. So it slows down the weight loss when we go into phase 3, and that's the purpose of it. So slow down, sometimes even stop it, not gain for sure, but we definitely want to give your skin a chance to catch up when you have quite a bit of weight to lose. So what changes in phase 3? Well, you're immediately going to add in your extended food list. So for those of you who haven't looked past phase 2, you'll want to look at phase 3 and look towards the back where it says extended food list. There's not much there, don't be surprised. Basically, those are additional foods that have a really good health benefit for you. So if you haven't already added any of those in, then we would immediately add those in when we move into phase 3. Sometimes we will utilize those phase 3 foods for variety. For those who have very restrictive meal plans, we may need to pull from those foods sooner just to help with compliance. The next thing that changes is that you'll start using your original food plan as a template. Okay, so the way that your meal plan is laid out, I call that the template. And so you'll use it for your portions, but you'll add in other foods that are not prescribed. And then you'll start to get away from weighing your foods if you desire. I can tell you personally, I may have a little bit of OCD, but I still like to weigh my breakfast and my lunch. Okay, 7 years I've been doing this. And then when I notice that I'm getting a little snug or I've just overindulged, I will also weigh my dinners. Some people are really good at eyeballing. I think I'm just too lazy, so I prefer to use the scale. And then of course, more physical activity. In the beginning, the first 2 weeks, we don't recommend any exercise so that your hormones can become balanced. And then after that, we will add in more activity. But for some people, they prefer to do even more physical activity, and it can become challenging for the body because you can't always burn fat while you're building muscle. So when you've reached your goals, that's the perfect time to add in more activity if you desire. And then, of course, learning to listen to your inner signals. That is really important when you have been following metabolic balance for the portions, for the foods, and for the combinations. Now, as you move into phase 3, you're going to need to start listening to your inner signals. Does that food taste good? Do you feel full? Are you truly hungry? How do you feel after you eat certain foods? Are you lethargic? Do you have bloating, belching, gas? Do you have more arthritis pain? So these are all inner signals that you'll want to become aware of. All right, so how do we begin this phase 3? Step 1 is we're going to set a personal alarm weight, and we're going to post it on your scale, okay? So this alarm weight is a calculation, and basically you take your target weight and times it by 1.05. So that's 5%, okay? So the reason that we want this alarm weight is because this is the ultimate weight that you do not want to exceed. We will fluctuate in weight. It is totally normal and totally okay. But there is a parameter that you'll want to set about for yourself, so that you know if you reach this alarm weight, you've gone too far and you need to restart the program. You need to do a reset. So what's that alarm weight then? So let's say your goal is to be 185 pounds and your alarm weight then would be 194 pounds. So that would be your maximum weight that you would want to reach before you do a reset. All right. And throughout this period, you'll also want to be continuing to weigh yourself and measure your waist when you're in phase 3. Sometimes the scale doesn't move right away, but you might notice you're getting bloated. Oh, maybe I am overextending myself in my foods a bit. So you might notice just some bloating first before the weight actually comes on. The other thing I was going to mention as well is I also recommend that you have what I call a fluctuation weight. This weight is your weight that you are comfortable fluctuating within, and it may happen just over a weekend or over a vacation period. So what that means is for women, they may gain very easily 3-4 pounds in a weekend. I would say 2 to 4 pounds is pretty easy for women. And that weekend weight might be just from, extra alcohol, overindulging. Maybe you had desserts, maybe you had popcorn and snacks. But come Monday when you've, put on the 2 to 4 pounds, that by the following Friday, just by being very clean eating, you'll know that you'll get that weight off. So that's a fluctuation weight that's very comfortable because it comes off very easily and very likely is just water. But then the alarm weight is beyond that. And so if you start to see yourself around that fluctuation weight and it's not coming off, that could be another time where you might want to do a reset. Men, they can easily gain 5 to 10 pounds over a weekend, 5 to 7 for sure. So step number 2, immediately add all foods from your extension list in your metabolic balance book. Okay, so number 1, we've got to set our parameters. Number 2, you're going to add in that extension, which again is not a lot of foods. Don't worry, that's not where it ends. And then step 3 is the beginning of the trial and error phase. So during this phase, you're going to introduce 1 new food item per day. You'll reintroduce old foods that were not originally offered on your meal plan. And how you want to do that is you're going to eat 1 new item once a day for 3 to 4 days, and then make note of any signals that your body's giving you. But there's also a very specific way that we're going to do this, okay? So 1 new item once a day, and eat that new item 3 or 4 days in a row. That's going to give your body a chance to give you some signals. This is when I did this is how I figured out that tomatoes are not good for me. I find that it flares up my arthritis, but I've also noticed that digestively it doesn't do well with me. I get loose stools, and now I'm to the point, actually, I get an upset stomach. So that is a really key thing, to eat the food multiple days in a row, because you can actually have a negative response to a food 48 to 72 hours after you've eaten it. And then of course, if you suspect that a food has been bothersome for you, write it down and then leave it be for a few weeks and go back to it. Try it again and just see if it was coincidence, or if it's, truly a food intolerance that maybe you shouldn't have, or perhaps you're just going to have it on occasion, which is kind of what I do with tomatoes now. I do enjoy tomatoes, but I just don't, I don't indulge often. So the new food should be added in this order, okay? Fruits and vegetables first. So any fruits and vegetables that you used to eat on a regular basis, start adding them in one at a time, once a day for 3 or 4 days. Then you'll go into your proteins. Maybe they didn't give you steak on your meal plan and you absolutely love steak, and maybe you want to make that, something on a more regular basis. And then lastly, of course, is your starches. So starches being potatoes, rice, quinoa, barley, what am I missing? Pasta, things like that. Of course, we want the starches to be added last, because that tends to be one of the biggest triggers for weight increase or bloating. And it tends to also be one of the things that will make us more hungry, because it's higher in carbohydrates. So through this process, what you're going to want to do, I recommend, and this is different than what it says in your book, but what I recommend through this process is you keep your portions the same, and you continue to weigh your food as you are adding in these new options. And I also will provide you with a list of different fruit portions, because I know that that's one thing that a lot of people don't have a lot of. And you might not know what a serving of watermelon is, or a serving of strawberries if they're not on your plan. So my recommendation is, during phase 3, continue to weigh your foods, keep the portions the same, unless you continue to lose weight and you wish not to. Then we would increase your portions. We will always increase your protein and your vegetables equally. So you might increase them 5 grams each at each meal, and then go on to 10 if you continue losing weight. Step number 4 is, if you desire, you can start to replace your latted cracker amount with those healthy starches. So, and I say if you desire, because for some people, they don't necessarily want to have rice or pasta or rye or quinoa or potato at every single meal. So what I have found is that not everybody needs to follow this specific step. It sometimes makes things a little bit more complicated, okay? As an example for myself, I don't eat the breads or crackers very often. So when I feel like having potato, I have potato. When I feel like having pasta, I have pasta, and the same with rice and quinoa. So because I'm not having it all the time, it's very easy for me to just have it when I feel like it and not really worry about measuring. Now, if you do want to have it more frequently, or if you are a person who is very carb sensitive, meaning when you have carbs, you gain weight like nobody's business. You may be the person that gains weight and it doesn't really make sense. You may not have even indulged very much, but your weight goes up when you have carbs. These are the types of people who are insulin resistant. So for them, you would want to calculate your starch and start with a small amount. So what you would do is take your personal allotted amount of rye crackers. So if you're allowed 3 crackers a day, some people are allowed 6 crackers a day. So whatever your amount is, start with that. So let's say it's 3 crackers, 10 grams each, that's 30 grams. You would start with that amount at your lunch. So instead of your bread or your crackers, you would have 30 grams of rice or 30 grams of potatoes, which, as you're probably aware, is not a lot to start with. Okay, it is a very small amount, but having it at lunch will give you a longer time to burn it off. And then you would go on to increase this and keep increasing it. And so you could increase 5 grams daily at lunch until you reach these regular portion sizes. And this will give you the opportunity to see, how is your body responding? And not just weight-wise, like, are you getting bloated? Are you noticing, with potatoes, some people have flares up their inflammation. So these are some approximate amounts that you can measure and know that this is a kind of a regular portion. But again, if you are not the person who's going to eat these on a regular basis, you can have a portion that feels satisfying to you and know that you'll be okay. So throughout all this, just as a reminder again, you're going to pay attention to your weight. And if you do start to notice an increase in your weight, you'll want to reduce that starch. So what are some warning signs that need to get back on track and do a reset? Lack of energy, fatigue or exhaustion, reduced well-being, your rings or clothing might be getting tighter, you might not be sleeping well, and of course that alarm weight might be approaching. Okay, you can have any or all of these symptoms. So always a good idea to listen to those signals. All right, so that's pretty much phase 4. I think we covered all the bases. And so what is, that was phase 3. And I think we covered all the bases of phase 3. So what is phase 4? Well, it's maintenance. So you're just going to rinse and repeat everything you found out about yourself in phase 3. What is your comfortable portion sizes? What foods do you tolerate? Your 8 rules from Metabolic Balance. You're just rinsing and repeating, okay? And the reset should be repeated once or twice a year. I recommend that you do the cleanse no matter what, whether or not you've gained weight, whether or not you don't feel great. I just recommend just do it. It's like an oil change for your car. So, it's part of maintenance. So go ahead and do the reset, the phase 1, once or twice a year. Even if you don't have any of those negative symptoms, it's going to keep you accountable. It's going to keep you on track. And if you wanted to add to that, certainly that is one thing that I also recommend. It's not part of the Metabolic Balance program, but often when I move people into phase 3, whether it's for a pause or whether it's because they've met their goals, I actually do recommend at that point that you do a detoxification. So different than the colon cleanse, I actually recommend that we cleanse your liver for sure. Sometimes we'll also do heavy metals or kidneys or lymphatic system or all of those things. And the reason that I recommend that is because every time you lose fat, the fat cells leave, but the toxins that were stored in those fat cells, they do not leave the body with the fat cells, okay? So picture this. You might have been when you started, let's say 250 pounds, and now maybe you're 180 pounds. So let's say you've lost 70 pounds. Well, you're a smaller person, you have less body, but you have a higher percentage of toxins now. And this has been proven by studies where they've tested people's levels of toxicity within their blood. What they found was when you lose a lot of weight, you're actually dumping these toxins into the body and into the bloodstream, and the body can't keep up because your liver can only do so much. So it only makes sense that your percentage of toxins will actually be greater when you are thinner, right? So do that oil change, of course, with Metabolic Balance once or twice a year, but it's also a good idea to do an actual detox. And so a detox is different than a cleanse. The way I like to explain a detox is that you actually have to take something to enhance your body's detoxification mechanisms. So there are different phases of liver detoxification, and your fat-soluble toxins can only be detoxed by the liver. This is why a lot of people, if they lose weight too quickly, they'll really start to look old, aged, and kind of like gray and ashy because they now have a burden. They have a heavier toxic burden or a heavier toxic load in their body. So when you need to detox, you actually do need to take a supplement to get all of the phases of liver detoxification going. And it's also not a bad idea to do your lymphatic system and your kidneys, and for some people, heavy metals as well. And there's different variables with that. Certainly we can talk about that on a one-to-one basis, or if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer that at the end. But very, very important. So, of course, as I mentioned, the 8 simple rules are lifelong, guys. I cannot stress this enough, okay? When we first met, one of the first things I probably told you to do was to start practicing those 8 rules. And many people come in at their first appointment feeling better, having lost weight, just by following those 8 simple rules. So just because you probably know them by heart right now, don't think that they're any less important, because they are the true phases of maintenance for metabolic balance. No matter where you are in the program, they are vital to the success that you're going to have. Now, having said that, a lot of people will ask me about, well, can I have 2 proteins? Yes, absolutely. When you're in maintenance, you can have those 2 proteins. Maybe you do want to have bacon and eggs, or chicken and cheese on your salad. But pay attention to those signals, and maybe don't do it all the time. I know for myself, I feel better when I don't duplicate 2 proteins in one meal. And one of the reasons for that is because when you eat those 2 proteins together, remember that you get less amino acids. The bioavailability is decreased when you combine proteins, but it also increases your metabolic waste and makes your body more acidic when you combine those 2 proteins. So it is one of the 8 rules, but certainly you're going to want to indulge at times and have 2 proteins. All right, guys. So thank you. Thank you for joining.